You all, and thank you very much for coming. First, let me express my thanks to the authorities for inviting me to conduct this visit. Since my designation as Human Rights Independent Expert for Sudan in November 2021, I have been monitoring the human rights situation remotely. So this, my first official visit, has given me the opportunity to observe the situation firsthand. During my 5 days in Sudan, I have met with the Attorney General, the acting ministers of Foreign Affairs and of Justice, the National Reporting and Follow-up Mechanism, NMRF, the Unit on Combating Sexual Violence in the Ministry of Social Affairs, the Human Rights and Child Protection Unit of the Rapid Support Force, the Chief of the Federal Police, a member of the Sovereignty Council in charge of social affairs, the civilian governor of Khartoum and head of the Joint Security Committee, as well as civil society representatives, human rights defenders, and crucially, many family members of victims of human rights violations. I have also met with diplomats and heads of United Nations entities. The chair of the Sovereignty Council was unavailable to meet with me yesterday, but I am now scheduled to meet with him this morning before departing. I was also unable to meet with the deputy chair of the Sovereignty Council, as I'm told that he has traveled. And as a matter of fact, I follow in the media that he is currently in Russia. I also visited Soba prison and interacted with the prominent activists arrested recently and some of the young activists detained there. I was deeply moved by the testimonies of loss and suffering I heard from many victims and their relatives. Stories of loved ones shot dead or injured while taking part in peaceful protests, and families prevented from visiting their sons and daughters in sites of detention. I applaud them for their resilience and determined quest for justice and accountability. In my meetings with the authorities, I welcome the reported release of not less than 100 people from detention this week while I was in Khartoum, and call for the immediate release of all others still in detention. I raise concern at the extension of law enforcement powers to the general security forces during the state of emergency and the temporary immunity from prosecution granted to these forces. I also welcome the establishment of judicial mechanism by the Attorney General to investigate alleged violations of the right to life and cases of sexual violence since the coup, while underscoring at the same time that the investigation must be prompt, impartial, and independent, and lead to justice and redress for victims. I look forward to the reports of these investigations. I reiterated my concern about the security forces' repeated use of excessive force and live ammunition against protesters since the 25th October 2021 coup, and noted that so far, at least 82 people have been killed as a result, more than 2,000 injured, and others, mostly women, subjected to acts of sexual violence. 2 policemen also reportedly lost their lives during the protest. I also expressed my concern at the negative effects of the state of emergency on human rights, attacks on medical facilities and medical personnel, harassment of media and journalists, arbitrary arrest and detention of protesters and human rights activists, and use of torture and other ill treatment. I also pointed out to the authorities how the political and economic crisis is contributing to retrogression in the enjoyment of economic, social, and cultural rights of the Sudanese people, in particular, the most vulnerable women and children, which were already precarious. I called on the authorities to put to an end the use of excessive force against protesters, lift the state of emergency, release all protesters and activists still held in detention, and ensure prompt and impartial investigation into allegations of human rights violations. Doing so would comply with their obligations under international human rights law and de-escalate tensions. I also discussed with the authorities the situation in Darfur and existing gaps in the protection of civilians, and in particular the delay in the operationalization of the security keeping force, the situation of internally displaced people, many of whom continue to be killed, injured, or subjected to sexual violence, including in the context of intercommunal violence. I stressed the need for perpetrators to be held to account and to accelerate implementation of the security arrangement contained in the Juba Peace Agreement. I welcome the assurances from the authorities about their resolve to accede to CEDAW as soon as possible and called for improved respect and protection of the rights of women, including those in detention. I will be meeting with the High Commissioner of Human Rights next week to discuss my findings so far prior to the 4th March interactive dialogue on the human rights situation in Sudan at the Human Rights Council in Geneva. I will continue to monitor the human rights situation in Sudan and to engage with all the relevant parties in perspective of the written report on the human rights situation in Sudan to the Human Rights Council in June 2022. And I'm grateful to the UN Joint Human Rights Office in Sudan for its support during the visit. I thank you once again, and the floor is yours.
شكراً جزيلاً.